Okay. Anyway, Nick, you introduced me because it's really your.
Yeah, so as I was saying, I'm Nick Davis, owner director of the Warwickshire School of Hypnotherapy, creator of the Blast Technique, and I'd like to introduce Richard Fluke, who is the creator of Advanced Clearing Energetics, and also an author of two books: Why Am I Sick? Hay House published author, and How Do I Heal? So welcome,
How can
Richard.
I heal? Yeah. How do I heal? Be another good title. Maybe
And we
that's a.
also have the lovely Caroline Day here, who has a wonderful story that I've only just discovered today from 32 years ago that connects you to Richard, that I'm hoping that she'll share with us.
Do you want me to do
Yeah.
that now?
Do you want to do that now,
Yeah,
or
that might
Yeah,
be.
do people
I'll
want to
rave
know?
about you, Richard. Um, 30 years ago, 32 years ago, a very young, you look very good actually for the number of years toil you've had, a very young Richard knocked on my door. I had recently been diagnosed with MS and I really wasn't very well at all at the time. And he said to me, I hear I hear you've got MS. I think I can help you. And being an open-minded sort of person, I welcomed him in. I was very curious. And he came in and he did what was then known as a breakthrough session with me. So this was the start of it anyway. And I have to tell you, Richard, I'm absolutely fine. I'm a bit cronky around the edges, can't walk in a straight line, that sort of thing. But I've got all my energy and I'm fine. I'm very grateful to you. So whatever you're doing now started very young. And there you go.
So
Well, this was because of
you must have been about 12 back then, Richard.
yeah, about 12. That was
Yeah.
about right. Well,
Wow.
I'll be 60 this year. Gives you some sort of idea, but also,
Nice.
Caroline, you were looking amazing. I mean, you're not. You're well. my mother always said never ask a woman her age. So what? You're just in your I don't know 60s.
Oh, well, do you know, I'm 69 this birthday.
Wow,
I know.
69. There you go.
Wow. So 32 years ago, 37 years old, you had MS, 37 years old.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Wow. And how did that, how did it restrict you in terms of, was it mental, physical? How did it kind of restrict what you
Well,
did?
I was so determined not to get it. As you know, this unconscious mind can't process and then a negative. So I got the lot. And I was so determined not to let it affect my walking. And as Richard said, when he first met me, I was crawling. I ended up in King Edward VII Midhurst on steroids by
Wow.
1990. I couldn't feed myself. I couldn't dress myself. I couldn't see. Oh, I did it very well. And I had bought a Morgan car.
Wow.
And I remember saying to the nurses, I'm going to drive that car. And they said, yes, you will.
Good, yeah. You good little girl.
Little girl. And I did. I studied, I took what you did with me and I really studied it. I embraced it, as you say. And I was determined to sort out how I'd managed to create it. My first reaction when I was diagnosed was how careless, because I already knew that there was a mind-body connection, and I thought if I created it, I must be able to uncreate it, and that was the start of my quest.
Wow.
Well, look at you. You've
I
been
know,
doing the quest, still
I know.
doing the quest, and
I've had
still.
dips every now and again, but the encouraging thing is for anybody with an autoimmune disease, if whatever symptoms you have, the working is still there. But I've always said it's a messaging system. If you get the messaging right, then it can all still work again. So I do encourage people to be bold.
And this is what's interesting about Richard's work. I mean, I've only known Richard, well, I've known of Richard for probably about 16 years. I used to stalk him without him knowing. And then about 8 years ago, I bought his book and emailed him. And being the lovely gentleman and generous person he is, he said, oh, come over to Prague and come and look at my work and this, that, and the other. And he did some work with me. Did I think it was a breakthrough session as well, and it's fantastic. But your work's evolved a lot over the last. I'm sure Caroline would be really excited to hear about some of the evolutions because I've kind
Yeah.
of studied it over the last probably 7 or 8 years since it became ACE.
I have to go
Yeah.
onto my phone and listen, but I'm still here,
Yeah, of
hopefully.
course.
Okay.
My
Perfect.
husband has diabetes. I have to feed him this Sunday.
Yeah,
I'll
no
see
problem.
you later.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the evolution of ACE, Richard.
Okay, so
And so firstly,
ACE,
what's a breakthrough session first, and then we'll move on to.
okay, well, the breakthrough session is an NLP thing.
Mhm.
For health, it's about 8 hours long, and I don't do that anymore. But it's still fantastic. If ever you do NLP master practitioner with some of the masters, particularly the line that comes from Tad James,
Yeah.
who I sort of principally studied with, and David Shepard, who principally studied with him. It's a long line of stuff, and that's how I even came across the meta medicine stuff and the Germanic New Medicine stuff, which we'll go on to in a bit later on. But a breakthrough session was looking at all of that, putting a client at cause, getting to the realize, as Caroline said, that how did you create this? Now, you didn't do it consciously,
Yeah.
but how did you create that? And leading on from that was me going, okay, so I've had some trauma in my life, some situations, and what really drove me down all of this was my mum getting breast cancer. And I was going, how did she get that? Because I knew that it was created by people that know me, they'll understand this story. It's a bit boring, but it gives you an idea of how I got into it. A horrible, acrimonious divorce from my dad. I'm in the middle of 3 boys, and it goes on and on and on, this whole thing. And I knew that her breast cancer was caused because she was ripped away from the 3 most precious things in her life.
So are
To
you
give people
saying that? So just for the blast listeners, are you saying that traumatic incidents can create disease, an illness?
I would say the best way to understand it is a trauma triggers the organs, the cells to change themselves. And the work that I've done since that particular time, I think I've understood and certainly understand why a body or the cells become cancerous. There's other things that go on as well at the same sort of time. Why do cells augment themselves? And maybe I could just give you that whole thing of exactly what I believe
Yeah.
is the process it goes through.
Yeah.
And this is, as you could tell from Caroline, she said, well, it was 30 odd years ago. Yeah, well, 30 odd years ago. And I wrote this thing in 2008, having studied meta medicine, Germanic New Medicine. There's probably one of the books in the back there. I could probably dig it out somewhere along the way. 2008, I finished that. I mean, that's a great book. You have the Hay House version of that.
Yeah, it's really good. Really enjoyed that book.
I have the Hay House version, but in Japanese.
Well, one of the things that I want to share is I thought you did a breakthrough session with me, but we certainly didn't 8 hours. So I think I was party to more of your newer stuff, because
Yeah.
the stuff you did with me was quite quick. I mean, some of it was longer, but some of the analysis stuff was really quick. And one of the things that I want to share with people is how much your work has influenced me in terms of your ability, not only to just read people and know what's relevant and what's not. And that was a big part of Blast, about not getting caught up in the stories. And looking back and connecting with you again recently was, how much that's influenced my work to be a lot more efficient, to just being able to read people, and then also getting to the root cause of what's causing these things. I mean, I don't treat illness per se. That's not my area of speciality. It's trauma. But I'm sure all the people watching this who are trained in Blast would love to know how Blast can be used within the work that you do to accelerate healing or provide healing in those. Because like we were saying about my mum, I said with my mum suffering with cancer, I used we used conventional therapy with chemo and got the best help in the Royal Marsden in London, but we also used some of the principles from your book about looking at the psychological side and the wider aspect. And I'm pleased to say she's in remission. So I'm a big fan of your work. So what other things, so in terms of the kind of process, so what could Blast practitioners treat? Is it all illness, or is it just sort of cancers, or is it? Because Caroline said she had multiple sclerosis, and I didn't know that, but she, you obviously did a wonderful job 32 years ago to show up like that today. That's incredible.
Well, I think give Caroline credit where credit's due. She went off and embraced this particular work and then went off and studied it and went down the rabbit hole to work out exactly what was going on
Yeah.
with regards to her. So I think that the key is to understand that when you're looking at or exploring trauma,
Yeah.
we now know that trauma triggers disease, right? We know, and I can through.
I mean,
years,
there's a ton of medical information. My brother's a medical physicist that says stress changes the way the body, it has such an impact on the immune system and things like that. And he was saying, stress is a killer essentially. So
and the thing is, and I've looked at those papers because there's lots and lots and lots and lots of papers that confirms that.
yeah,
The problem is they don't really have an understanding of the process of exactly how it works.
yes,
And that, I think, is the key. When you get to understand the process, and one of the keys to that was the work of Gerd Hammer, was the work of German New Medicine, which I went off and studied. And he talked about the psychobiological connection, connection with trauma, which is how I found out my mum, her breast issue was all about deep separation. At the same time, I was going through a horrific herniated disc, which rendered me unable to walk when I was really studying this stuff and starting to teach it for the first time. So the key, I think, oh, and you can also see, you talk about hypnosis. There's loads and loads of books on hypnosis behind me and stuff like that, where it's just trying to fathom out exactly what was going on. So this has been a long, long, long drawn out journey. And basically what I discovered was this: when we have a shock, and I coined the phrase Yudin moment. Yudin stands for something that's unexpected, dramatic, isolating, no strategy. And I actually have some fun slides on that, but we may cover that a bit later on. Anyway, when that happens, it lands in the heart and it changes our heart rate variability. So this is how the heart goes boom, 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 boom. And each one of those beats has a little variation.
Yeah.
And each one of those is actually signaling to the body exactly what's going on in the environment. The irony is that the heart is picking up on this information and sending out that information to the rest of the body. It's also doing it before we have the shock. Get a load of that. We know that from the HeartMath Institute. It's done loads and loads of experiments. They say anything for 1.5 to 7 seconds beforehand. That's what they can understand. So that's that particular piece.
Yeah.
So what is it really doing? So the information I worked out was going up into the brain and landing in a particular area of the brain based on embryology. That is the way that we are made. We have 3 embryonic layers: endoderm, mesoderm, and ectoderm. Now, they're all resonating at different frequencies with our environment. So there's an actual link there. And then also the other way to think about it, it lands in the heart, but also then goes down into the enteric nervous system, which most of that is based in the belly. It's not completely. But the enteric nervous system is really important. So we've got the heart has its own nervous system. We know that because you take a heart out of one person and put it in another, and it will still keep beating. The brain and the central nervous system, you can actually take that off and put that onto another person. Revolting thought, but whatever. But it can be done. Then people that have that don't tend to live very long, just so people know. The next thing, let's move on, is the enteric nervous system, is the gut nervous system. Again, that can be taken out of the body and actually kept alive. Now, you may say, oh, this is all garbage, but I actually put the citations in the book.
And there's 1 or 2 citations in there.
Oh, yeah, and I talk about that because one of the things that has really sort of flummoxed me is when I talk about this stuff, there are people out there in the world go, oh, that's a load of rubbish. And I work a lot with medical doctors and psychiatrists and people like that. And when I just say, but go, I'll send you the PDF, start searching. You're welcome. There's 1,600 plus citations.
That's the first thing that people say, is it science-based? And that's what you've done with this book. And it's not taking you, it's taken you how many years to complete?
4 years. The citations alone took me 9 months to just make sure they're correct. And I will be honest and put my hand on my heart and just say I didn't get everything right. But then again, I looked at the papers and some of their stuff's absolute garbage.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
if we took out the
Come
number of
see,
other
come sir.
sites, yeah,
Yeah.
it's great. But let me explain something else, because I think this may
Yeah.
just blow people's minds. You see, most people, what we're told is how we get disease is the body's made a mistake.
Right.
First thing is the body has not made a mistake. That's a sort of fundamental meta-medicine, meta-health, Germanic new medicine sort of philosophy. But what does that really mean?
Yeah.
The body's not made a mistake. I think the understanding is if we have a trauma externally, so we have something whereby a rape, for
Yeah.
argument's sake, which you can deal with, with BLAST. I
Yeah.
know we don't do that online, but you
Yeah.
could in that way, but you can deal with that.
Yeah.
Or a person has had a severe separation issue. Could be with an argument with mum or
Or what
something.
about somebody losing somebody suddenly, a sudden death? Would that be the similar thing as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that would just shake your whole world apart. And those are eudaimons. And so
they affect the heart first, and then the enteric nervous system.
Goes down into the best way to describe it doesn't actually do this, but the best way to understand it in our simplistic terms is it lands and goes right into the belly, so we sort of feel it.
Yeah.
And then it shoots up into the brain. Not technically how it works, but it lands in a specific area. So, for example, I'll just give you 4 examples. There are one of them would be, let's say, breast cancer, right?
Yeah.
Where the mother has been ripped away from the children, or the children have been ripped away from the mother.
Yeah.
Then this would typically land on the left breast and affect the breast ducts. So the biological reason for that is such that the breast ducts start to widen, so that when the child or when the mother arrives back with the children, the milk can be expressed extremely quickly down through the breast ducts to nurture the children who have been lost through separation from the mother. Now, this happens in nature with animals in the same way that it does with humans. So we have this particular problem. On the left breast here, because the brain is opposite wide, it lands up here in the brain here. That's because of the breast ducts are ectoderm, and they land in the cortex, the outer part of the brain. Now, so this gets a little bit complicated. I'll tell you a couple more. We also have, say, for example, someone breaks their wrists here. My son did actually, snowboarding when I worked with him, and he broke his wrist, fractured it really. And this is all about not feeling strong enough and not having the strength. Now, he was leaving where he was going to go on to something else. He just didn't feel strong enough, and it fractured here. And this would land up on the left-hand side, and the wrists are right inside around here in the brain, in the middle part of the brain. So, this gives us an idea of the location. I'll give you a couple more. If something is, you have something like irritable bowel syndrome. I recently worked with a woman with irritable bowel syndrome, Crohn's disease, so bad that she couldn't work. She's on medication and all that sort of other things. Wasn't helping. So we cleared out all the Crohn, cleared it all out. That's in the gut system. That shows up in the brain stem. And there's one more, which is swelling, which is a really important one. Inflammation, that's
huge at the minute. Forgive the pun, but so many people suffering with inflammatory disease and arthritis and loads of different diseases are related to inflammation.
And inflammation, I wrote a whole chapter on 2 chapters actually on inflammation. It's something that's the whole Meta Health crew, and particularly Gert Hammer, he's passed away now, couldn't get his head around at all. So I really went into it and found out more about it and worked out exactly how it works, how the traumas work, and I've worked with lots and lots of people on inflammation and brought down their inflammation. Sometimes you can do it in under 24 hours. So people with extremely swollen arms, I've worked with people like that. Just their arms double the size the right arm double the size of the left, and
Yeah.
overnight being able to bring it down. So this is great work, because I don't know anybody else who's doing this type of work. And I'll be honest with you, Nick, we need more people out there
Yeah,
doing
yeah.
this work,
Exactly.
because it's just
Yeah.
crazy. It's taking me a long time to piece it all together. But excuse me, but it does work. And
Yeah.
that's the crazy thing. It really, really does work. And I can go into more detail on that. But Nick, ask me some more questions, because
Yeah, yeah. So that was interesting, because for me it was the I didn't know that the actual shock or the trauma actually chooses a body part to express itself in, and that was what was really interesting, because I only deal with the trauma side of things. And when you said, this shock will represent itself, and I think you were talking about its pathway. And forgive me, this was in the Hay House book. But you were saying it was like a circuit that should express itself for a period of time, and when that issue is over, it will naturally heal itself, but it kind of gets stuck. Can you talk more about that?
sure. It all depends on quite a few things, but let's take a breast cancer, right?
Yeah.
Because this is a thing that affects so many women. I deal a lot with breast cancers. Really challenging, and the medical way of dealing with it is, okay, yeah, let's chop it off, chemotherapy, radiotherapy, and you'll be fine.
Doesn't the therapy, the actual surgery and the chemotherapy also traumatize the patient?
Yeah. And the research is now showing that any woman who goes through that, the prognosis that they give, and I'm going to be fair with the doctors here, because
Yeah.
this is all the doctors are taught. They
Yeah.
don't know anything else.
Yeah.
All they have is what their paymasters are teaching them, and
Yeah.
it's a closed shop. So anything like this, they never hear about it, so they don't know about it, so they can't recommend it. They don't know whether it works, whether it doesn't work. And so their answer is, well, I don't know anything about it. But anyway, I've got chemotherapy, and I've got radiotherapy, and I've got surgery. The research is basically saying it's not good. The prognosis from all of that is just really quite appalling.
Some people actually die from the chemotherapy. A lot of
Oh, well, there is the actual papers are saying exactly that.
I mean, that was one of the reasons that I basically paid a doctor who I'd trained in hypnotherapy and NLP and Blast to psychologically support my mother through all of her treatment, because
Fantastic, yeah.
the treatment was worse than the cancer on 2 occasions. I mean, the cancer,
Yeah.
she was in incredible pain because she had stage 4, but two of the treatments, I honestly looked at her and I thought, oh my God, it was rough. I mean, but the psychological support and all the other, the nutrition and everything else we had around her helped her through that. But yeah, it does knocks the body around, doesn't it? The treatment.
I think only man, and I'm not talking about women, although women do, oncologists. Well, I think only man would be horrible enough to create a therapeutic intervention based on nerve gas and nerve gases that totally screw up the nervous system, and then create it so that they inject this stuff into people, and people stand there happily and go, yeah, give me it.
For 8 hours sometimes. Yeah.
It's so barbaric.
Yeah.
But we have to come right back to the history of it. Can I share that with you?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah.
So I think just so people understand how this is all created, there was this doctor, who was a celebrated doctor in the United States called Dr. Livingston. And he traveled across the United States from west to east. Oh, I don't know whether it's east to west, whatever, it doesn't really matter. And he went to all these towns and he sold this amazing elixir that could cure everything. It costs on average about 2 months' wages for someone to take this. And, he was celebrated. And except he really wasn't. His name actually was J.D. Rockefeller Sr. And he was a bigamist, so he had multiple wives. He was a rapist, convicted rapist. He was ran out of every single state that he was in. He ended up in Canada. And as he was in Canada, he grew up with his children then. He had multiple children. One of them was J.D. Rockefeller Jr. J.D. Rockefeller Jr. was basically a very menial bookkeeper, but he had been brought up by his father, who was a cheat. He cheated even his children, deceived them. And he was quoted as saying, I do that because I want to make them smart. Okay. So then what happened was J.D. Rockefeller Jr. Took over, got into oil, and just like his father, is specifically palm oil, and then he found out about the oil trade. He actually set up a company. It's very, very, very dark, this, but he set up a company, and we'll talk about this in the book. It's really relevant though. Called Standard Oil, and he monopolized, along with Andrew Carnegie from the Carnegie family. Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, and he used that to monopolize every part of the oil system throughout the whole, practically not the world, but most of America. And he was hated by the American people, absolutely hated. During that time, and the American people were some of the healthiest on the planet. They used homeopathy, they used acupuncture, there were universities studying psychological stuff, there were universities looking at all sorts of incredible different techniques. Some of it was weird, I admit, and shouldn't have been done, but then again, it was at that particular time. Now, what happened was that J.D. Rockefeller, with Standard Oil, had monopolized everything. And the way he did it was this. He would go, and if anybody came in, this is very relevant, came in and sort of trying to create competition, he would either just lower his prices so that that person couldn't do anything, or he would, with Andrew Carnegie, lower the prices of freight or stop any freight so you couldn't get anything to and from, or he just totally monopolized absolutely everything. He monopolized the whole company. Eventually, the American people hated him so much that he had to sell the company. One of those companies that came out of that was Esso, that you may come across. Now, this is very interesting because he said to the American people, because you made me and forced me to sell my company, you're going to pay. And what he did was quite interesting. There was a particular doctor at Johns Hopkins University who his brother was an art school. He ran an art school college, and he started studying Johns Hopkins University's way of doing things, which was all about using a chemical intervention that had been derived from the byproducts of oil manufacturing. Hence, the whole pharmaceutical industry started off there. Then what happened was he also grabbed all of education, again with Andrew Carnegie, and destroyed education in America. And he systematically, using what is called the Flexner Report, you can look it up, Flexner, Flexnor, Flexner Report, and he went all the way across the whole of America. And what they did was they went into universities, they closed down any university that did not conform to this pharmaceutical way of doing things. So anything that was considered, other than a pharmaceutical intervention, which is really just about making a customer.
Yeah,
that's all it is, just making a customer. I think most people are unaware, but a cancer treatment costs about $1 million in the US.
Oh, well, I found out one because I paid for my mum's consultations privately, and I went to look at the chemo treatment privately. One course of chemo is £100,000. That's one course. So
people have no idea.
Yeah, it is.
It's about money.
It's about money.
And you, gosh, they love you when you're a cancer client because, whoa! And in America, the doctors get a kickback. They get a
Yeah,
kickback. So
well,
they go, oh,
they
come
do it.
on in.
They do in the UK. I spoke to somebody very senior in the NHS who confirmed privately to me that you're prescribed blood pressure, statins, and there was another tablet because they actually get funding back to the surgery for the number of those things. And I was doing some research around statins and how bad they can be for you. And actually, one specialist in heart disease said they only actually statins will give you 4 days extra to live. But my dad's on statins, and he is basically we're chair bound. He can't walk and everything because of the pain, the muscle wastage, and everything else. And this is why your work is so important, because I think sometimes people don't realize, obviously conventional treatment's important and you should always look at that first. We need to make that caveat. But it's also really healthy, I think, to look at all the other stuff. How you
As
can,
one of my doctor friends says, Dr. Rebecca Garcia, she's from the US and she's a toxicologist. She says, we understand the medical side of things. We really do. We get it. And
Yeah.
that's okay, Look at that because it's an option. It's a choice.
yeah,
Along with that choice for whatever you're dealing with, there are a load of other choices which just keep going on and on and on, which you've never heard of. For example, who's ever heard of ozone therapy? You ever heard of it?
no,
Efficacy is fantastic. That means, is it really good? Yeah, it's fantastic. I have a book somewhere in here all about ozone therapy. It's got paper after paper after paper after paper after paper. And she was telling me that when the insurance company, it's a different system over there, when they bill the insurance companies for whatever ozone, it's just not very expensive. It's oxygen with an extra oxygen molecule in there.
Yeah.
So it's O3, right? When they bill the insurance companies say, we don't know this. So she has now on stock all these papers and she just sends it to them and they go, oh, okay. And they sign it off.
That was interesting with my mum's cancer journey as well, because I gave all the suggestions to my brother and he locked himself in a room, and because he's a medical physicist and he's autistic, he would just study the science and he'd come back and go, yep, we'll do that. No, we won't do that. And then what was interesting is he said, oh, there's some really good research around CBD. And I said, well, what about the THC? I've heard, and I showed him some stuff, people who've been healed with the stuff that is illegal, but it's actually, they're looking at licenses now to thing. Anyway, he started looking up the THC as well. And he said, actually, there's a lot of research, not in high quantities, around the efficacy of that and the effectiveness. High volumes of vitamin C intravenously, and the loads and loads of things. And he pulled all these papers out that aren't really common knowledge. And he said, there's some really good research out there. He said, the problem is, and my brother's a researcher, he's got a PhD in medical physics, and his degree's in astrophysics. He's a researcher, and he said a lot of people don't know how to research these things. He said that's why it's not common knowledge. And like you said, because the model that was created, that the body's separate from the mind, it doesn't benefit them for these papers to come out. But when it's your nearest and dearest that's sick, you will do that research. And that's what, I kind of want to get across to the people watching this is, I hope you don't mind me saying this, Richard, but Richard is like me. He's a geek, and he loves to study, and he will literally, like I do, cross the T's, dot the I's, look underneath, over, above it, round the side, and he'll save you all that time of researching this for yourself. He's an absolute library of knowledge. You can ask him any question. Literally, Richard and I have conversations that go on for hours and hours, just because they never stop, because there's so much stuff in there. But one of the things I want to get across to people is, with the course that I'm hosting Richard with, is you're going to learn how to, well, I mean, you probably explained this, but how to treat disease, illness, and what it does, it combines, excuse me, it combines really, really well with Blast. So Blast will work on healing the shock, the trauma, the thing that started this process. And this is the stuff I don't teach, and I was going to create a course on it. I thought, why reinvent the wheel? I could just, get Richard in, who's the expert at this. You know, he's been in the business for 30 odd years. You've taught this all around the world. You know, get Richard in to teach this stuff over 2 days. So that what kind of things would they be able to work with after the course?
I think what we're going to be able to do is we're going to show people how to get into the organ.
Yeah.
Okay. Then the heart, the brain, the belly, and then I'm going to tell them and explain how we can get into, excuse me, the underlying mechanisms that create the disease.
Yeah.
And then teach them how to unravel that.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to do. So, you know, it's a question of finding the core energy behind it. There
Yeah.
are certain things that I would just, on the whole, stay well clear of.
Yeah.
So cancer is a really challenging one. If people are really committed with that, that's, you know, that takes a time. And the other one are real serious psychological illnesses.
Yeah.
That can screw people over, especially if you don't know what you're doing. Because
Yeah, and I always say that to people, you know, don't go for the really difficult things unless you really want to specialize in it. You know, I've worked with psychosis and schizophrenia successfully a few times, but you have to get permission from the consultant, the psychiatrist or their consultant. You have to get written permission to use anything with them. And other than that, you can't work with them. You know, I've worked really successfully, but I always make sure that it's psychosis that's trauma based. It's not from people who maybe had drug induced psychosis, which is a completely different thing. So I would echo that. This is really for people who want to heal, you know, that are passionate about healing disease and illness. Would that be correct?
I think so. Yeah, it's not. I think so. I know so. Let me just give you an idea. I work with people with really challenging things. And I said to my wife only recently, I said, why did I choose to do that?
Yeah.
It's really, really tough.
Yeah.
And she says, I don't know, you'd be you'd be wealthier. You know, you'd have I don't know, a Morgan or a Porsche or a Ferrari out in the yard or
If you'd have
something.
stayed teaching NLP.
And I mean, I used to get paid an absolute fortune per day. I don't get paid that sort of money. So this is a real vocation. It's something that you do because it's in your heart. You don't want to do anything else. It's just that. And I want to reiterate that. It's not, it's given me a great life. I will tell you that. I wake up at night going, I am so blessed.
Yeah.
But and I didn't feel that when I was working in the business side. I just went, I'm happy I've got all that money.
Yeah.
So you don't do it for the money, you do it because there's a calling.
Yeah.
And
so
that's me.
What I think I'd like to do, because there's not many, there was a lot more people said they were going to be on here to ask questions, and really the important thing is about us fielding questions for the training that we're going to be running. So I'd like to set up another date if we can. I'm just going to confirm. So the training's on Saturday the 18th and Sunday the 19th. It's going to be about 9:30 to 5 both days in Stratford-upon-Avon in the UK. Beautiful place. You'll be able to go and in your lunch hour have lunch there and go and visit the Shakespeare Museum. And you know,
and apparently you said that you've arranged the bard to come.
The bard will be there. You know, just. Telling some stories and poems, and maybe
apparently he's not very good, is he?
no, he's
I sign a bit silly.
But what I want to do is I want to set up another Q&A for people who are thinking about doing this course. Richard's already agreed to give you both of his books signed copies, which are worth £30 each. And then we're going to talk about you know, what we're going to be covering on the course, but I really want to get some more questions and more people on here, so we'll leave this as a recording, but I'm not going to record the next one because there are 10 people that said they were going to attend today and they've all said they want the recording. So the next one we're going to do, we're not going to record, but it's only for people who want the questions answered rather, that are thinking about doing the course so that they can find out a bit more, and Richard and I can go into those Q&A if that's okay. Been wonderful to have you here, Caroline. Thank you for your story.
Oh, we can't hear you. You have to unmute there.
Pop your microphone on.
I was listening all the way through, and it was fascinating. I studied new medicine as well.
German new medicine.
With David. He did it for a while.
Yeah.
What I found was, and I'm hoping you'll have changed that, is that there's an awful lot of Latin names for things and conditions. And if you want to look something up, it was hard to decipher unless you were actually a medical doctor.
Yeah.
But
I agree.
what I also found was that BLAST is absolutely fabulous, because everybody talks about the trauma. Well, how do you get rid of trauma? Well, hello, so
Yeah.
we
Exactly.
we can do that bit. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this is perfect, and that's why I only wanted it to promote it to the BLAST practitioners, because I think, it works so well with, the work that Richard does, that it knits itself so well together. So, if you genuinely do have an interest in healing disease, chronic illness, things like chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia.
Fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, actually anything to do with pain. It's wonderful with pain. It'll bring pain right down. I think the best way to understand it is knowing exactly where to hit.
Yeah.
That's the key. And that's what I've been able to work out. And it is not straightforward and it isn't simple. So you take my 30-odd years of working this out, and then you've got a solution. And with BLAST, you can just go, right, well, we're going to go here, we're going to go here, we're going to go here. We're going to understand this. And then the body shows you exactly, or tells you exactly where to go. And you go there, you clear that out, and it's like, what happened? I mean, you talk about hypnosis is because the actual trauma is that the person's in a hypnotic state.
Yeah.
So taking that out using BLAST is just so wonderful. Clearing the trauma is super easy.
But we've actually confirmed it now. Dr. Peter Naish, who studied his work as part of BLAST, he said people who are suffering with PTSD and trauma and get these flashbacks are in a somnambulistic state of hypnosis.
That would make sense.
And scientific papers prove that now. Now, the other thing as well that he said, which was a hypothesis I had, and this was really nice, I only found this out not last year, the year before, when I actually met him and gave him some BLAST pens. He said, when people are traumatized or experience PTSD, it actually makes good hypnotizable subjects into somnambulistic or really good hypnotic subjects. So it actually changes the brain. Wow. So that makes sense, and if you're saying if people are in illness or in this hypnotic state, I mean, for the purposes of BLAST, we call it eyes open trance, because if you access a hypnotic memory, it's inadmissible in court, just to be on the safe side. But they're in this trance-like state. Makes perfect sense.
Well, you just get into an elevator or go up a lift. You're in a hypnotic state anyway. So people, I don't know, the authorities they've lost it. Anyway, let's not go into that. But I think the key thing is to understand that there is a process behind all of it. But we didn't even get into mitochondria or melanin and structured water.
We'll do that on the next one. So what I don't want to do, I want people who are interested in doing the course to come on and really ask some questions. Caroline, thank you so much for sharing that story. I didn't know 32 years ago that you had MS. I've never.
Well, there you go. You see, I don't talk about it, Richard.
Yeah.
I've never seen a doctor. I didn't see a doctor for 28 years. I wasn't very well a couple of years ago. But you must have influenced me at the time. And I always said I didn't want to go to one of these groups, because it's race to the bottom with your symptoms. So I didn't want to know any of that. So I've kept myself very focused on being well. But some of the trauma got in the way until I met you, Nick.
Oh, wow.
There you go. Yeah.
And it's connecting the dots. It was all meant to happen. So thank you so much. Thank you, Richard. Thank you for your generosity and your knowledge and everything, as always. Can I tie you down to a date for next week at all? Are you available maybe Thursday at all?
Thursday is definitely, can do Thursday.
6 o'clock UK time?
6 o'clock is fantastic.
Brilliant. So I urge each and every one of you watching the recording, Richard's going to answer some questions, and I know there's going to be some more gold in here. So I'm glad you didn't talk about the mitochondria. I'm glad you didn't talk about the structured water. I'm glad you didn't talk about the melanin or melanonin.
Melanin, yeah.
Melanin.
Melanin.
So don't say that, because there's secrets. Only the people that are coming on the next one will we reveal those. So those of you watching this video, We're going to share that at 6 o'clock on the 18th of April. A Zoom link again. It's not going to be recorded, the next one. So it's only going to be there for people who join the call and ask the questions, and then we'll go through what's covered on the course. But I really would urge you, and I think Caroline would echo this, if you've never trained with Richard or worked with him, he really is one of the, not just a good guy, but his head is full of so much knowledge. I mean, that I know Richard bookshelf, and you're only seeing probably 10% of or less of what he's, you know. So he really is has so much knowledge about this stuff that there's no point reinventing the wheel. This is the guy that you need to train with to learn this stuff, and I'm going to be so grateful to host him in Stratford on the 18th and 19th of May. So clear that out in your diary. And for those of you, you know, really do get on the next one. Thursday, April the 18th at 6 p.m. We'll send a Zoom link out, but it's not recorded, and we're going to go into this other stuff. Caroline, thank you so much for your story. Richard, thank you once more again for your time and your generosity. Guys, thank you, and I'll see you all soon.
Thank you.